Hello, welcome to Psychopath in Your Life. This is episode number 187, and I'm your host, Dianne Emerson. I'm the author of the book Psychopaths in Our Lives, My Interviews. Today I'm going to be talking about a subject that I started to talk about earlier, and the question is, according to the music, is how long has this been going on? What happened was I was attempting to discuss this part of the PSYOPs in an earlier show, which would have been, I think, 185 or something. But anyway, it got yanked by the bots. And I finally figured out what yanked it. And I think it was the words that you saw on the screen previously. So I'll move away from using that because remember, this has been going on for a very long time. I don't know how this stuff pops into my brain, but I was thinking about Pocahontas. Good old Pocahontas. She was also a line actor also herself. So nothing is as it seems, and nothing ever really was as it was presented. So it's just really a lot to take in here. So I did revise the entire show because it's just too hard to try to remodify one that got taken down. So I wasn't using hateful terms. I was just discussing something to try to help us to understand how they all play together in this. Because there's a little bit of intermixing, because the term means they usually hold drills in advance. And some of these groups actually focus on hiring ex-military via Craigslist ads and whatnot. So, I don't know. I used to believe it all. And like someone said, who would dream this up? Well, my answer is psychopaths will. I mean, just the goal they have is to freeze us into place. And fear is the best weapon. Control the masses with fear. Because there's a lot of things going on here. So let's talk about it today some more. And then I'm going to be talking in the future about some other PSYOPs events that have happened and take a look at some of them closer. I think the goal might be to take a look and see which ones aren't PSYOPs, but we'll give it a good try here. So, and in conjunction with this, I've also been thinking a lot about our programming. And we have a lot of society programming. We have society programming about women, about maybe blonde, pregnant women. We have what appears to be a pretty clear war on women, war on children. Muslims seem to be the target if you watch my show about 9/11. And the thing is that we as regular people, I guess in the non-psychopath category here, we haven't been told a lot of these society programming things. For example, I got into quite a dispute with one of the psychopaths in my book during the interviews because what he was lamenting about was that they have to keep pushing buttons, as he said, to figure out which is the right answer. And we come equipped with these things because I was talking to him about behaviors around funerals. And I don't remember my parents ever having to talk to me about how to behave at a funeral. So we come equipped with certain things that they don't seem to really understand or know how to process. But they do obviously understand what some of our society programming is. Because, for example, your parents don't have to tell you these things, but you just learn early on, like, for example, at a funeral, that you probably don't make jokes or texts and things like that. These things naturally come as part of our society programming that ever since we're probably little children. And we can't really pinpoint how we got these ideas, but we all seem to have them. And so speaking of children, in a lot of these actor deals, they do involve children. And I'm going to be kind of skirting around that a little bit. People use children as a tool, okay? They claim some evil maniacs on social media are telling no one died. So what they're doing is, because of these actors, what they're doing is using the children to lure you into their web by saying, look, the children were harmed. And then it's like, oh, look at me, I'm just reporting about the children. But if you buy into all of this, remember one thing. Part of the New World Order is the transgender agenda. So if you're hanging around these little spooks and agents who have channels and stuff, and they're talking to you about all these crimes against the children, like Epstein and all them, I'm here to tell you that they didn't really happen, okay? They all fall into this PSYOPs bucket. Now, I'll have to get back to some of these. I haven't looked at every single one of them. But let's say in general, we can pretty well conclude that the larger ones that we have in our conscious minds, Epstein and all of them, were completely staged. And I keep getting back to the point is, what kind of people write these stories? I mean, think about it. So it's really just programmed to get us into line because fear can have a lot of good values, because you don't need as many troops on the streets if you have everybody so afraid to do anything. So anyway, so what I'm going to be talking about today is a grand trifecta of cases, and this involves a blonde woman. She's pregnant, and she's also playing the actor role. And who am I talking about here? Well, during 9/11, which we now know, well, look at my show and come to your own conclusions. My conclusion is likely psyops, okay? So there's a woman that I found interesting in 9/11 that I wanted to expand on a little bit more here because of what a large role she played into our social programming, because she's blonde, pregnant, and now a widow. So anyway, so what happened was during 9/11 was there was a incident, and there were 4 planes, and 2 of the planes never really showed up anywhere, but that's for a different tale, for a different story. But anyway, one of the planes was being flown by a woman, and her name was Lisa B. And her husband, Todd B., he coined the now famous term, "let's roll." He was supposedly killed aboard a hijacked flight headed for the Pentagon. Todd B. and his fellow passengers knew they had to do something to stop this plane from killing hundreds of people. "These terrorists have tried to scare us and paralyze us. I'm not going to give them that," they say as they terrorize the rest of us, right? So a little bit of history about Lisa B. In the 6 weeks since the attacks, Lisa became a de facto spokeswoman for the heroes of Flight 93. Flight 93 was the flight that was headed toward the Pentagon, which never made it, never to be found again. So her husband, and there's a lot of numbers to pay attention to, Flight 93, her husband of 7 years, Todd, who was 32, Lisa was also interviewed countless times. She was actually spent a few months traveling all over the place, okay? Remember, she's supposedly pregnant during this time after she lost Todd. But let me digress and get back here, okay? So Lisa, she was 32. Todd was 32, She was left a single mom with a toddler, an infant, and a 3rd child due in 3 months. 3rd child, 3 months, okay. Lisa remembers the phone ringing on the fateful morning, the dead air on the line when she answered. Todd had asked an aerophone operator to call his wife as he and the others prepared to jump the terrorists. As he dropped the phone, he yelled, "Let's roll!" Those were the last words that Lisa heard from Todd. Charming. Instead of being lost in her personal tragedy, Lisa has turned her sights to helping other families left behind by the crash of Flight 93. See, they turned these into become money-making opportunities, it appears, but just my opinion. So she wanted to turn this into another opportunity, which killed all 44 people on board. There we go, the 4s, okay? The D's and the 4s mean death, because I remember that's why they had D-Day, sending those poor kids to their death. But anyway, so 19 other children, some of whom she met at Pennsylvania crash site and at the White House, will grow up without a mother or father. But thanks to Lisa, she stepped in with her charity here, okay? What was noted at the time was Lisa said, "This is the first positive story of 9/11 that happened on Flight 93. People clung to the hope that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." Todd, she went on to say, "Todd and the others showed us how we could turn a bad situation into some good." So, yeah, see how they all turned this whole thing around, and then it became a matter of heroes versus where's the rest of the evidence. So anyway, so a lot of this is just a false flag. And like, for example, I've been thinking a lot about all this testing. It's pretty miraculous how quickly they came up with those tests. And then also, I believe, and this is just my belief, I believe that the testing is all about DNA gathering. Now, what they're going to do with the DNA, I'm not really sure. But I don't believe, like on social media, people are talking about shapeshifters and reptiles and all that. I don't believe that. If they were so advanced, I think they'd probably get a better handle on those big hands and feet on all these transgender people. So anyway, so yeah, so it becomes a story unto itself, because you start to then look at what was Lisa telling us here. Well, women can be heroes. She traveled around pregnant for a few months, about poor Todd and helping the country. Quite a wonderful gal there. So anyway, one of the original ones I'm going to give you as an example, an original actor was OSB, Osama. Okay. They did an interesting thing that I ran across that I didn't cover during the 9/11 show that I found fascinating, because since we've been talking about vaccination programs and all of this, and then actors, this is kind of an interesting one. The CIA actually ran a fake vaccination program that eventually proved successful in hunting down Osama. Well, I don't believe that's true. This is their story, okay? I believe that he's sipping a Mai Tai somewhere, and they always knew where he was. But this is their story, so let's just go along with it, okay? So the CIA ran this fake vaccination program. It's very interesting, because remember, now they're doing military and vaccination programs, okay? So keep your eye on that ball. So they went on to say, while it was controversial to use a medical program as cover for an intelligence operation, the CIA has since said it will not repeat this. I'm sure we have their word for it, right? The prospect of locating bin Laden was priority one, and clearly trumped any ethical conflict someone might try to find here. Those were their own words, okay? The CIA went on to say they had tracked a courier to the place where they suspected bin Laden was hiding, but were struggling to confirm with absolute certainty that he was, in fact, inside. They had his DNA on file, thanks to the fact that his sister lived in Boston. Okay? And this is one other thing I'll throw in here that I covered in the 9/11 show, is that, they didn't actually tape when they supposedly got him, okay? And the only reason I found was because Hillary Clinton was quoted as saying they wanted to spare us the bloodshed. So anyway, they didn't have their cameras on then. Same thing in Epstein. Cameras are always off, aren't they? They sure seem to be on if one of us was committing some crime. But anyway, I digress here. So what had happened was, this is still according to their story, okay? The agents realized if they could obtain DNA from one of his children who were living in the compound with him and match it with his sister's, they could confirm with a high degree of certainty that he was indeed inside. So what they did was they enlisted the help of a Pakistani doctor who went throughout the city under the guise of the vaccination program, identifying each address, administering vaccinations, and obtaining DNA samples. Think about the tests we're doing now, right? And also, I've done another show, one of the founders of this platform, wife is in the DNA business. I think it's that 321 DNA kit or whatever it was. But anyway, so eventually they identified him through his children. The rest is history. So that's kind of interesting, is that how they used the same thing that they're talking about now, military vaccines, and got this guy. So, not like it hasn't been on their mind before, right? Now, I don't believe that any part of this is true, but I do believe this is a cover story. So then I believe that cover story may be used for other stories, like now. Yeah, I could agree with that. And while I was running across a bunch of oddball things, one thing that's interesting, another one that was interesting was Edward Snowden, another psyops, and a very good actor. I think he's related to a Rockefeller, but anyway, I can't really remember. I'll have to take a look at that because I have a few more that I'm going to be covering. And if you leave in the comments any you find interesting, I'd be glad to take a look at those. Because, for example, I haven't been talking much about McCann case or the Ramsey case over the years, and I've never spoken publicly about the Ramsey case, about what my involvement was there. And so I'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks. I think it's probably a pretty good time now for all of this stuff. Kind of get our minds off of the other stuff and start digging into some of these psyops, just because, if people don't understand how we got here, good luck getting out of this deal, okay? So let's try to put our heads together and figure out how, when I say we're surrounded, I'd like you to take that with not a grain of salt, but the reality that I'm not just coming up with this stuff, okay? Here's what I think. I think it's all a great distraction, but it does really seem to be working. Are you as prepared as you should be? Are you looking at all these CIA-created drama? we know they showed Photoshop all these things. So a lot of it could be very appealing because they want those flash and they want your eyes on things here on this platform. So, we know something bad is going to happen. At least that's my guess. So is this all is just a distraction from fear or just not thinking? Everyone should be thinking about getting prepared. Everyone. Do you have flashlights? Do you have food? Do you have batteries? Do you have a radio? So, in the meantime, while you're thinking, try to do some other activity of your own rather than just doling out in front of the screen. Do your own investigating. Think about a crime you remember, then go look at the photos and stuff like that and see what you find now that you kind of overlooked back then. It's pretty fascinating. It's also very alarming, I must say, when you start to peel it back and think that, gee, this has all been a big lie, hasn't it? So it is a lot to absorb. So anyway, next I will be covering the McCann case from a couple of different angles. Someone has done some interesting work finding the holes in the story. And I will also take a look at any ideas what you think I might find. Well, is Kate really Kate? Or might we start calling her Ken? What about John Benet Ramsey? It was quite an ordeal. I actually was involved in tracking down the Ramseys who were online posing. They actually, I guess they pulled the actor deal off and then they go hang around online and keep spinning because I'm assuming that's because how you get your paycheck. But I was able to track down them online and identify who they were. So it's kind of an interesting story. So I'll be talking about that more. So be safe out there and I'll chat with you soon. Goodbye for now.